The room was quiet, dim, pulsing with the tension of legacy about to be cracked open. No camera crews, no screaming headlines, just silence, and the weight of decades-old secrets pressing against the walls like ghosts that refuse to be buried. Somewhere in that stillness, a young man's voice trembled not with fear, but with something more dangerous: resolve. Rymir sat forward, the glint in his eye sharper than the years of rejection and lawsuits he had endured. He wasn't just some man chasing a last name. He was chasing the truth. And the truth was chasing someone back. Across the country, 50 Cent wasn't in a studio. He wasn't on a stage. He was on his phone, silent, unmoved, watching a clip. That shouldn't have reached him. Rymir's latest court filing. The accusations, the pain, the absurd power imbalance. Something about it felt off. Felt ... too familiar. He'd seen this story before. But now it had Jay-Z's name on the header, and something about that made it personal. The industry didn't like noise, and Rymir was making a lot of it. There were meetings behind closed doors, legal teams scrambling, a publicist suggesting a quiet payout. "Make it go away," one executive muttered under his breath, thinking the cameras would never find them in the shadows. But the truth doesn't care for polished statements or carefully worded denials. It bleeds. 50 took a breath, then posted, "I don't like bullies," his caption read. No names, just smoke. But everyone knew who he meant. The internet lit up like dry grass in a lightning storm. The street started talking. Whispers turned to headlines. Did 50 just pick a side in the Jay-Z paternity war? In a downtown cafe, Rymir got the notification. He stared at the screen for a long time, not because of what was said, but who had said it. Someone finally saw him not as a threat, not as a fraud, but as a person, as a son. The world shifted just slightly on its axis. But enough to matter. What nobody saw were the back channels buzzing. A call placed. A warning issued. Back off. The message was cold, mechanical, and designed to instill fear. But this wasn't 2003. And this wasn't the old 50. This was the version of Curtis who had survived every bullet, physical, verbal, legal, and built a throne from the ashes. He wasn't backing down. Not this time. The legacy Jay-Z had crafted. The image of control, of poise, of unreachable billionaire brilliance, it was slipping. Not in public yet, but inside. The mirror was cracking, and Rymir's face was in the reflection. In the legal world, motions were filed like daggers. New DNA demands, old affidavits resurfacing. Forgotten witnesses who suddenly wanted to speak. People close to the situation now whispering to journalists in exchange for anonymity. One of them said it plainly. He didn't think the kid would last this long. But the kid did, and now he had backup. In the days that followed, the silence around ROC Nation was deafening. No press release. No counterpost. Just tightened security and a shifting air in the upper echelons of the empire. Rymir wasn't a headline anymore. He was becoming a movement, the kind that rattled even the most insulated of legacies. He walked differently, now still quiet, still respectful, but there was steel in his spine. Because the man he was allegedly, descended from the one who had once turned a city into a kingdom with words alone, was now retreating into silence. And silence had its own sound. It screamed guilt to the people watching from the sidelines. Back in New York, 50 wasn't sleeping. Much. Not because he feared retaliation, but because he knew the weight of what he'd done. The entertainment world was built like a chessboard, and he'd just made a move that no one saw coming. Jay-Z wasn't just an artist. He was an institution. You didn't cross him without feeling the heat. But Curtis knew what the heat felt like. He'd walked through it before. He'd become fireproof. The calls started coming in. Executives, lawyers, people he used to call friends. Some tried to reason with him. You're attaching your name to something dangerous. Others warned him. You don't know the full story, but he did. He knew enough. Enough to know that a kid chasing paternity for over a decade didn't just wake up one day and decide to burn an empire. He was trying to find himself in a world that kept slamming doors in his face. Meanwhile, Rymir's case caught new wind. A federal judge reopened part of the file. Journalists began filing FOIA requests. Archived footage from earlier interviews resurfaced. There was one clip-grainy handheld, years old, where a much younger Rymir said it all. "I just want to know who I am." And that one sentence did more damage to the brand than any lawsuit ever could, because it was human, and the public was starting to feel it. Behind the scenes, Jay's attorneys worked overtime. They built walls, barriers, legalese so thick it could drown anyone without deep pockets. But the world was different now. TikTok snippets turned court. Documents into viral justice. Threads unraveled narratives that used to take months to write. And in the middle of it all stood two men, one demanding a name, and one defending his right to ask. There was a private meeting one night, no press. No posts, no entourage, just 50 and someone tied close to the situation. The details of that conversation never leaked. But those close to 50 say he walked out of it colder. Not angry, just resolved. Whatever he heard in that room didn't shake him. It anchored him. Same night, a cryptic tweet went out. "Blood don't lie, but people do." No tag, no follow-up. But it caught fire. Across the boroughs, conversations shifted. In barbershops, on corners, in studios where Jay's name was once gospel. People asked the same thing. Why not just take the test? And that question, simple, fair, undeniable, began to haunt the legacy built on silence. Because legacies, like bloodlines, eventually demand proof. The storm didn't wait for an invitation. It was already in motion, brewing across platforms. Whispered through halls of media executives, discussed in corner booths where power negotiated with fear. Rymir didn't have the money. He didn't have the machine. But now he had a voice. And voices, when amplified by the right hands, can level towers. 50 knew this. That's why he kept pushing. Not with noise, but with presence. Silent reposts. Subtle nods in interviews. A single Instagram photo with no caption. Just him and Rymir in a studio framed against black walls and exposed light bulbs. It didn't say anything, but it screamed everything. Meanwhile, Jay's inner circle started fracturing. There were murmurs that even Beyoncé was uncomfortable with how far the denial had gone, not out of betrayal, but fear. Not for the legacy, but for the humanity buried beneath it. Blue Ivy was old enough to read headlines, old enough to ask questions. And questions have a way of multiplying when left unanswered. Rymir wasn't trying to steal anything. That was the twist. He wasn't suing for money. He wasn't writing a book. He wasn't trying to shame anyone. He just wanted acknowledgement. A moment of eye contact with the truth. The media had a field day. But the public turned scholar. They dug up old photos, compared timelines, debated facial structures. A viral thread titled Proof, Jay-Z might be Rymir's father. You Decide clocked millions of views. People weren't waiting for courts anymore. They were building their own judgments in real time. And Jay's refusal to say a word? That silence was now working against him. Then came the leak. An old deposition transcript, long sealed by request, surfaced. It showed inconsistencies. Names of women involved. Timelines that didn't match. It's an old friend of Jay's, now estranged, hinted in a podcast that everyone knew there was a kid. It was the moment the public perception began to tip. This wasn't a kid chasing clout. This was a man locked in a silent war with a ghost who refused to speak. Back at 50's office, the calls stopped coming. The same execs who warned him were now silent. Not because they agreed, but because they feared being on the wrong side of it. The industry loves power, but it also loves redemption. And Rymir was becoming that story. A kid who didn't break. A kid who refused to fold even when the whole game was rigged. One night, Curtis posted a short video, no music, no edits. It's just him staring into the camera. He said, "Sometimes people think they too rich to be held accountable. I don't need nothing from nobody but that kid. He needs the truth, and you're gonna hear it whether they like it or not." It went viral. Millions watched. But more importantly, millions listened. The wave had turned. Jay's PR team scrambled. There were sudden charitable initiatives, few vague interviews about fatherhood and privacy, but it all felt too curated. Too late, and Rymir. He stayed quiet. Let the momentum speak. He wasn't attacking, he was surviving. And in that survival, he was revealing everything. Because the longer you run from the truth, the louder it knocks. The courtroom wasn't the place justice would happen. Everyone knew that now. Was never about lit, was about power. But something had changed. The narrative had shifted outside the walls of the court, beyond the judge's bench and legal jargon. It was in the streets now. In conversations, whispered between barbers and bloggers, lawyers and Lyft drivers, and above all on platforms, 50 Cent knew how to dominate. Every story needed a villain. But this time, the crowd wasn't buying the old script. Rymir stepped into the courthouse with no cameras allowed, no entourage, no designer suit. Just the weight of everything he'd carried for 20 years, and the fire of someone who knew he had nothing left to lose. In the courtroom, Jay's team kept their faces tight, their eyes avoiding contact. His lawyers asked for more delays, more dismissals. But the judge, tired of the dance, surprised everyone. He allowed Rymir's team to file new evidence. The silence cracked like thunder outside. The media pounced. 50 Cent posted a single word on Twitter. Boom! The internet ignited. Fans pulled receipts, legal analysts began threading timelines. Even daytime talk shows broke rank, discussing the moral weight of what Jay-Z's silence was doing. What had started as a private allegation had now become a cultural conversation. What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to turn away? Meanwhile, Jay-Z was nowhere to be seen. His team put out statements about respecting privacy, about misinformation. But Rymir wasn't hiding behind lawyers anymore. He took to a live Q&A on Instagram, quiet, direct. "I'm not here to destroy a man. I'm here to reclaim mine," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And sometimes honesty cuts deeper than accusation. The tide reached Hollywood. Black entertainers, actors, musicians, creators began speaking in code. In award shows, in interviews, there were small acknowledgments. Every child deserves the truth. One artist said on stage, in a late-night monologue, host cracked a joke. Jay-Z's got 99 problems and a son might be one, but the crowd didn't laugh. They paused. Something about it didn't feel funny anymore. Then Beyoncé blinked at a high-profile charity gala. She appeared without Jay, alone, radiant, but visibly distracted. Cameras captured her stepping into a private corner to take a call. Paparazzi lenses zoomed in. She was crying. Not a breakdown. It's just a single trembling moment. And for the first time, the story wasn't just about Jay and Rymir, it was about the family, the legacy. The myth unraveling under the weight of a forgotten truth. Back at 50's headquarters, strategy meetings turned into brainstorms for a documentary. He wasn't just backing Rymir. He was archiving everything. Old footage, paperwork, voice notes. "I want this on tape," he told his team. "They've tried to erase it. But if it's on film, they can't run from it." Behind the scenes, Jay's inner circle grew hostile. Threats came in. Subtle messages. Friends stopped answering calls. Rumors swirled that a high-profile outlet had killed a major exposé under pressure. But it was too late. The toothpaste was out. The silence, once golden, now rotted like mold under the light. And then it happened. A former Associaton old friend from the ROCFella days appeared on a podcast. Not invited, not promoted, just showed up. He didn't name names, but he told a story about a baby, a hospital visit, and a powerful man who asked everyone to forget what they saw. It was raw, it was dangerous, and it was time-stamped. Within hours, it was clipped, subtitled, uploaded, and dissected by millions. Jay-Z didn't respond, but now, the silence was starting to look like guilt. New York didn't sleep that night. Not the music journalists, not the street blogs, not the gossip accounts that traded secrets like currency. A stillness swept over the city, the kind that comes before a reckoning. On his private rooftop, 50 Cent stood alone, eyes scanning the skyline. He wasn't celebrating, he was calculating. Because now that the truth was finally echoing, the next move had to be perfect. They're gonna come hard, he told his videographer. They always do when the mask slips. The next morning, everything moved fast. TMZ ran a story hinting that Jay-Z's legal team had been quietly pressuring ex-staff to sign updated NDAs. No confirmation, just whispers. But whispers from TMZ aren't whispers. They're smoke from a fire someone's trying to bury. Meanwhile, 50 uploaded the first teaser for the docuseries, grainy footage of Rymir as a teenager, cutting a birthday cake alone. No father, no family. Just the caption, "What if your whole life, the man who could change everything, chose silence?" The internet shattered within hours. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Rymir deserves the truth. Hashtag Jay-Z. Face it. Hashtag DNA for dignity. Fans were split. Some stood firm behind Jay refusing to believe their icon would dodge responsibility. But others saw something different now. They saw the cracks. This same man who gave the world family feud in rhymes about? Healing Legacies was suddenly the architect of a cover-up. Across town, Jay's PR team launched a counter-campaign. Leaks to the press claimed Rymir was being used for clout. Anonymous sources painted him as unstable, opportunistic, bitter. But it didn't stick. The public had seen his tears. They'd heard his voice crack. Rymir didn't look like a fame chaser. He looked like a son abandoned Beyoncé, still silent, canceled 2 scheduled appearances. Her mother, Tina Knowles, posted an old quote on Instagram. "Sometimes the people who are meant to protect you are the ones who cause the deepest wounds." No tags, no explanation. But the world filled in the blanks, and then came the court. Order. A judge in New Jersey, clearly fed up with the back-and-forth, ruled that the DNA evidence, once sealed under complex procedural red tape, could now be reviewed in public record. A frenzy exploded. Legal experts were already parsing the implications, but the human story was louder. Jay would now have to face the data or explain why he WOULDNT.50 flew into New York that evening. Camera crew in tow, ready to meet. Rymir, face to face. Their meeting wasn't flashy. It was quiet, almost sacred. No chains, no champagne. It's 2 black men sitting across from each other, one who built an empire from nothing, and one still fighting to be acknowledged by his own blood. "You good?" 50 asked. Rymir nodded, but his eyes said everything. The documentary's first episode dropped that weekend. And it was brutal. Not sensational, brutal in truth. Interviews with childhood friends, medical records, screenshots of ignored messages, and one voicemail, Rymir's mother, years ago, leaving a message for Jay's old assistant. Her voice broke mid-sentence. She begged for closure, and it never came. That night, Jay-Z posted a cryptic photo on Instagram. No caption, just a black square. Comments were turned off. But it was too late for riddles, because the one thing more dangerous than a denied son, it's a denied son with a voice, a following, and 50 Cent behind him.